Today we're launching a major new program by Gazprom. The development of the Karasevy gas field in the Yamal Peninsula.
The energy industry is a fascinating one, perhaps because of the great power energy providers hold and the lengths they'll go to in securing a share of the market. Russia is the world's second largest exporter of natural gas. 80% of its reserves are found in Yamal, a resource-rich peninsula that's also home to many Nenets people.
The Nenets are born in nature. We're part of nature. Reindeer are our life.
What impact does the extraction of natural gas have on the Nenets' way of life and their environment? How much longer can they survive? Every year, the nomadic Nenets of the Yamal Peninsula move their livestock over 1,200 kilometers, one of the longest migrations of its kind in the world. The herders are divided into 50 so-called brigades, a term dating back to the Soviet era. They live off the meat and hides of their animals. Here in the tundra, we're following two of these brigades, number 1 and number 4. The Nenets search tirelessly for the scarce lichen their reindeer need to survive.
Our daily routine is determined by the seasons. Day after day, month after month, we're on a constant search for lichen, moving from one grazing area to the next.
Vasily Seroteto is the patriarch of Brigade Number 1. He leads his herd of over 2,000 reindeer on a long and arduous route. In the Nenets language, Yamal means end of the world. This Siberian peninsula, north of the Arctic Circle, is around 700 kilometers long. In the spring, the Nenets lead their herds to fresh pastures on the coast of the Kara Sea. In fall, they leave the treeless tundra with its bitingly cold winds and migrate south to the slopes of the Ural Mountains. Along the way, they cross the frozen Ob, one of Russia's largest rivers.
The tundra is everything to me. We travel as far as the Kara Sea. Sometimes we're on the move for 3 days at a time. Then we rest for a day, and then we go on for another 3 days. We lead a nomadic life. It's the only life I know.
"50 years ago, Soviet geologists made a discovery that would change the lives of the Nenets forever.
45 лет назад, в мае 1974-го, открыто Харасавейское месторождение, а уже в следующем году оно названо первой целью на полуострове Ямал. За дело взялись с энтузиазмом. Работы захлебнулись, и к 1981 году были полностью свернуты. Харасавей, а вместе с ним и весь полуостров Ямал, Советскому Союзу оказались не по зубам.
They built this drilling rig in 1982. They were looking for gas and they found it. In 1984, they built a seaport. It lasted a year. And because the bay was quite shallow, they dredged a channel. Then there was a storm and flooding, and it collapsed. Nature doesn't tolerate things like that. It washed everything away. They'd been working on it for 2 weeks, and nature destroyed it all overnight. That's how it goes.
But the Russian authorities were determined, despite the costs and Yamal's harsh climate. The region began to be industrialized. The large Bovan-Enkovo gas field lies directly across the migration route of Brigade 4. To reach the summer pastures, the herd has to negotiate across roads and pipelines. Over the years, Myancha Khudi has seen the tundra around the settlement change drastically.
When I was your age, my father and grandfather used this trail. They showed me this route. One day, we found a covered sled on this hill. It was geologists looking for gas deposits. There used to be nothing here. Look, my son, we would set up camp down there before the pipes existed. Now we have to go under the pipes. We used to move our herds over dry ground. Today, the journey is difficult.
50 years ago, it was only the reindeer nomads who were using the land. Now it's the industry who wants to use the land as well. And it's the infrastructure, and it's all sorts of people who want to use the land. And the towns are growing, and the industry needs settlements for their fly-in, fly-out workers, and all of that is taking land. And that is a real pressure. And there's no way to invent these pastures somewhere else.
When I was 17 years old, they were drilling for gas all around me. Everything was covered in sand. They built these drilling rigs everywhere, which led to more and more sand. Even the tracks of the reindeer were covered in sand. When I saw them for the first time, I thought, that's probably it. If I don't educate myself now, I won't be able to help my parents. I decided to study so that there would still be reindeer in the future.
Vasily Seroteto's son Alek is one of the few Nenets to have a university degree in law and economics. He lives in Yarsaleh, a town in the southeast of the Yamal Peninsula.
Of course, I can't speak for everyone. But as someone with a university education, I have a responsibility to my family, my parents and brothers. My job is to support them and stand up for them. It's a big responsibility. I'm self-employed. I run my own business. I worked for the administration for 8 years. I was passionate about the interests of the indigenous population. I was involved in talks with the oil and gas companies. But then I became too headstrong for them. In 2011, they fired me.
Russia now has access to the Arctic region's resources. But at what price? And how will families like Alek's be affected?
Around the world, interest in the Arctic is growing rapidly. It's also a top priority for Russia. Major Arctic infrastructure projects are being actively pursued.
Every year, the International Gas Forum is held in St. Petersburg. For the Russian state and the country's ruling elite, the goal is simple: to become the world's leading energy exporter.
You probably know that more than 80% of natural gas reserves and more than 20% of oil reserves are located in the Arctic. So these Arctic projects are definitely a priority for us.
The actual process of gas extraction requires the construction of infrastructure. Before the gas can be sucked to the surface, the land has to be prepared accordingly. You need sand, water, and many other things. They take away a lot of our grazing land because they need the space for drilling machines and rigs. The process causes a lot of problems. They'll keep extracting gas until there's none left. It'll certainly continue for another 50 to 100 years.
As it gains strategic importance for Russia, the Yamal Peninsula is changing rapidly. Villages like Salehard have been developed into towns. Others, like Bovanenkovo, are now dormitory towns housing workers. The infrastructure is growing. Energy giant Gazprom has built the world's northernmost railroad. Another Russian energy company, Novatek, has worked with French firm Total to build Sabeta, a massive gas plant in the middle of nowhere. There's also a port and an airport with direct connections to Moscow.
The Yamal Peninsula is very important for us. It gives us the opportunity to open up new markets. The gas produced on the Yamal Peninsula supplies regions including North and South America. Practically all gas-importing countries have received this gas. Harnessing this potential is one of our top priorities.
In the West, Russia has built pipeline networks to transport gas overland to Europe. In the East, there's a sea route, with Yamal as its starting point. Tankers filled with liquefied natural gas depart for the West. Others head towards Asia. But from December to April, the sea route through the Bering Strait is blocked, covered by a layer of ice over 3 meters thick.
We can reach any country by sea. Our strength lies in the fact that we can also supply gas to Asia. But to do that, we need strong icebreakers. If we take the route via the Ob and Yenisei rivers to Cape Jelania, we have to fight our way through 1,000 kilometers of ice. And if we go via the Ob and Yenisei to Cape Zhezhnyov, it's 4,500 kilometers. With the northeastern route, we'll enable year-round shipping for the first time.
The northeastern sea route is the backbone of Russia's Arctic strategy. Nuclear-powered icebreakers clear a 6,000-kilometer passage along the Siberian coast. Moscow wants to tighten its grip on the Arctic's raw materials. But Vasily Soroteto is concerned with something else: the survival of his herd and his way of life.
I'm responsible for everything involving the reindeer. If a leader mismanages his brigade, if he makes mistakes, it'll take more than a year to set right again. If he doesn't prepare well enough for the summer, then the whole season will be a failure. And after the summer comes the fall. If the leader makes the wrong decisions in the fall, then it's too late. There'll be big problems. If he's fallen behind, he won't be able to catch up. The October snowstorms are a big challenge. The reindeer might lose the weight they put on in the summer. If we don't arrive at the winter grazing areas by a certain time, we won't be able to catch up over the winter. Then the reindeer won't be fattened up enough. As long as we arrive at the grazing areas on time, we leave the reindeer to their own devices. They graze like wild animals. But if they don't put on enough weight, they'll be too skinny, and they won't calve in the spring. So if I don't do my job properly, I won't get high-quality meat next fall.
For the icebreakers and their crews, keeping sea lanes clear for the natural gas tankers is also a tough job. Departing from the Ob estuary, ships can reach Asia in 15 days, as opposed to 30 days via the Suez Canal. No longer protected from human intervention, this part of the Arctic is gradually being transformed into a 6,000-kilometer maritime highway.
Ice drift has set in. That's a big problem.
We need to use some new tactics of ice navigation, new type of work, you know. We have some experience with icebreaker assistance with small ships. We know how to lead them, we know how to tow them, yes, but with such new type, we don't know, we don't have such experience. And this is the most problem, maybe, nowadays. Usually we can break about 1.5 meters, sometimes 2 meters. We can go through this ice, yes. Our main purpose is to lead the ship, yes, as an icebreaker. So we're going very close to the ship and we break the ice near the ship, and that can help to start move. The main problem that we can go through the ice, but the question is if our ship could, that ship that we are leading sometimes can't. And if we can go through the ice, but the ship which we are lead can't, main purpose is not completed.
Good afternoon. Have a seat. In the past, there was no northern sea route, so we're dealing with a transformation. It has to be carried out in a sensible way, so that we don't just wipe out everything that's existed here for centuries. The deposits where gas or oil are extracted are Bovanenkovo, Sebeta. There's Gazprom Dobcha Nadim, Gazprom Neft Yamal, and the Novi Port deposit. The gas from Novi Port is taken by pipeline to Cape Kameny, and from there it's exported via tanker to other countries. The icebreakers there are in operation all year round. Today, between 60 and 70% of our nomadic population live below the poverty line, and in such a rich region. It's absurd.
Their way of dealing with the advancement of the gas industry is not taking a total opposition and saying we are going to defend our land against the gas industry because it can only happen in conflict. They try to find ways in which they can continue their own lifestyle in spite of having the gas industry on their land. And if Moscow says that that deposit is going to be developed, these people are not stupid. They know that if Moscow says it, it will be developed, full stop. They can have something to say about smaller issues. And I think this dedication to the smaller issues is what rescued a lot of the lifestyle that we can still see today.
In the tundra, a man without a wife is no longer a man. He can't live alone. But if a woman's husband dies and she's left alone, she'll survive easily. She knows how to do everything. She cares for the reindeer and for the children, and makes sure that there's enough firewood.
She can also dismantle the chums we sleep in.
The only important thing is that someone goes ahead of her, another brigade or a neighbour. Then she just follows them. She can take care of everything, but it's hard for a man to live in the tundra without a woman.
He doesn't last.
Nature here used to be untouched. Now they're destroying it with their gas flares and their emissions. It's impossible to live near Bovanenkovo. There are plumes of steam and ash from the gas flares spread over a 25-kilometer radius. And then there's all the dust. It doesn't just rise up and burn. It stays in the air and lands on the ground again within a radius of 25 kilometers. There's no longer any grazing land around Bovanenkovo. It's just a huge gas field. I've been there many times. These days, it's much warmer there than it is here. The geese return earlier than they do here. They come with the warm air. When we arrive, the geese are already there. I don't know what the future holds for us. I have no idea.
Most of the hydrocarbons that are in the Arctic are located on the Russian side, and those will be developed. That's what's driving our current climate problem, and so it's kind of ironic that obviously as the Arctic opens up and you can now start drilling and extracting more resources such as oil and gas, then that's just going to further amplify the climate change that we're going through.
A lot of methane is produced in the river valleys. After it rains, the clay soil is soft, and the surface becomes crusted. And when the reindeer tread on it, the ground starts to move. The clay soil is 50 centimeters deep. Underneath is sand, and then comes the permafrost.
You're warming the Arctic up so much faster, and all the permafrost areas are thawing. And that's going to affect all the plant species as well as the animal species in the Arctic as well. The ice is melting faster, the permafrost is thawing faster. I mean, all of these are interconnected. It's just that there are traditional indicators of how they understand the climate system, how they understand storms and ice conditions, and species migration. All of that is changing as a result of climate change, because I think the pace that we're seeing today in the changes that are happening in the Arctic is so fast, much faster than anything that's happened in the historical past. So that's why their traditional ways of knowledge aren't working anymore.
Once the water came up to the top of the steep incline, then it sank. That's how the slope was created. Now it's difficult to get up there with a loaded sled. The sleds often tip over. Here, the water level has stayed the same. We keep going towards the Kara Sea, where it gets stronger. After the next rain, the bank will collapse too. The sand is soft, so when it rains a lot, the banks collapse. Sometimes we have to dig with spades so that the reindeer sleds can get up or down. We have to be able to ascend and descend. This is probably the most difficult passage. Each brigade has its own routes and its own grazing areas. We don't want to get in each other's way. You can't sleep because of the noise of the gas flares. We have no choice. We have to get used to it. And at some point, tiredness overcomes you, and you fall asleep despite the noise.
As the industrial infrastructure in Yamal has grown, the grazing areas have shrunk dramatically.
The winter of 2013-2014 was normal. But then a sudden thaw set in, with fog and rain. The temperature rose to 5 degrees Celsius, and the snow started to melt. And then a snowstorm came in from the north, and the temperature dropped to negative 25 degrees. It became difficult for the reindeer to find food. The ground was covered with about 30 centimeters of snow. And half of that snow was actually ice. For the first 2 or 3 days, the reindeer somehow managed to cope. But on the 4th day, they ran off in all directions. Our whole family helped. With our combined efforts, we managed to catch up with the reindeer, a long way from the chum where we were sleeping. We drove them back to better pastures. On some of the hills, the reindeer were still able to find lichen to eat. That's how we survived that difficult time.
We hardly slept the whole time.
We lost about 200 reindeer. Many of them died.
They scattered in all directions. Some of them ran towards the settlement.
If we hadn't joined forces and got help from our friends who live in the settlement, they wouldn't have survived. In some cases, whole herds of reindeer have died from malnutrition. It was a difficult time.
The most important thing for us is to have control over the price of meat. So we have to go and meet with the agriculture industry, the district administration, and the ministries. In the summer, Nenets brigades have come across drilling rigs just 50 or 60 kilometers into their journey. Where are they supposed to go?
Our money can set up programs to support the herders. First and foremost, reindeer herding is a way of life. It shapes the way people live. It's their tradition, their culture. And because they provide us with valuable meat, the state supports them. The state buys the meat from them for 450 rubles per kilo. The retail price is lower than what the state pays the herders.
All through the summer, he says, we're going to raise the price of reindeer meat to 450 rubles. So slaughter as much as you can. I said to him, what are you doing? You're ripping people off. We've been negotiating an acceptable price for 5 years so that the reindeer herders can make a good living. Now there's some decision that the meat will cost 450 rubles a kilo. They'll never pay that price for meat. They keep telling us to slaughter more animals, but only to reduce the reindeer population. That's what it boils down to. Their real goal is to reduce the size of the reindeer herds.
The settlements are growing, and of course, that's a good thing. Yarsalay is growing. Gazprom is helping to build homes. That's interesting, of course. But I don't think the reindeer herders are getting much out of it. It's good that the children go to school. There are boarding schools being built, probably with money from Gazprom.
The boarding school system was set up a long time ago. It's been around for a century. Even our grandfathers went to boarding schools like them. It's been that way for a very long time. There's really no other option. Parents send even their youngest child to boarding school because they want them to get an education. It's the only way.
Modern reindeer herders have to be able to read and write. They have to be able to understand how things work. This century, the majority of reindeer will disappear. And then only a few of our grandchildren, maybe 2 or 3, will be left in the tundra with their reindeer.
The future of Brigade 1 is in the hands of the younger generation.
Strength, endurance, and speed. All those are important here. I'm good at lasso throwing, fishing, and everything else you need to survive. When reindeer separate from the herd, you have to go looking for them and bring them back. I'll stay here. I'll continue to live a nomadic life on the tundra.
Summer has come to an end.
Не двигаться. Вся. Ханимя на нем гуляем. Ханил, давай. Ханил. Тирика не одет. Там. Она не может такой ханова стынуть. Ой, не убой. Ой, что сюда рычевый. Цинанси. Слушай, ты живу. Вверху. Вин дай.
As always, on September 1st, our family welcomes its new students. Today, there are 202 first graders. Dear first graders, I wish you luck and success.
For the
children who come from the tundra and who have lived with their families in small communities, things can be a bit difficult at first, because we have over 1,500 children here. Suddenly they're a part of a large group, so sometimes they can feel a bit lost.
Ты пчела, пчеловод, а пчелу мед, а не повезет, с тобой не повезет.
Нужны определенные изменения.
Change is needed to broaden the horizons of young Nenets.
Более широкие горизонты для молодежи. В образовании такая экзотизация.
Few Nenets have university degrees.
Тем, что преподаватели или чиновники видят.
The children of the tundra herders have limited options when it comes to professions. Veterinarian, zoo worker, teacher, and those who teach these children think of them as having limited cognitive ability. They make no effort at all to improve the children's level of education. For example, to help them get good grades and go to university. So it's a vicious circle.
The nomadic way of life may disappear altogether. It's already on the verge of dying out. It may stagnate. It may soon be completely gone. Most likely, 50% of our population will become sedentary in the future. But what will people do if they can no longer breed reindeer?
We're going to extract more and more hydrocarbons from the sea. Should we be doing that in the Arctic? The answer is a clear yes. Gazprom is working on it. The Northern Sea Route is being actively explored.
The Northern Sea Route will continue to be developed. I think that by 2050, the Arctic shelf belonging to Russia and other countries will be an important global supplier of hydrocarbons.
Vasily and the other Nenets don't know what the future holds. But it will certainly involve dealing with climate change and the other consequences of gas extraction. The Nenets will have to rely on their strengths, their knowledge of nature, and their resilience. Only then will they stand a chance of continuing the nomadic way of life they've practiced for generations.
Nature recovers quickly. It doesn't tolerate destruction. It heals quickly, just like a wound in the body heals. Things may not change much in the next few generations, but gas isn't inexhaustible. Eventually it will run out. After that, the Earth will recover and be even better than before.